going to have a variety of topics today. Talk a little bit about our ERF tool and what's it looking like for the upcoming week with the cool weather change. Maybe discuss how, is anybody using it? Then we'll talk about some stand establishment points, some digital tools. How do you, what are the decision levels for replants and stuff like that as the crop's coming out. And then there is a little bit of some rain updates, and then herbicide touch points if we get to the end. So we'll just go ahead and there we go. There's our agenda. I talked through it. All right. So trivia question. Since we're going to talk some dry weather, some wet weather in our soils, some planting conditions, corn nodal roots form at what depth? And bonus points if you can tell me why it forms at that depth and why our planting conditions matter. I cannot see the chat though, guys, so you'll have to.
I'm monitoring it.
Cool.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Yeah.
Everyone might be driving. It might be hard to answer trivia when everyone's out and about.
Yeah, we still got a lot jumping on the call, so.
Right. It happens on busy days. It happens. So 3/4 of an inch. Sorry, guys. Want to make sure we stay on time. But this is something, I chose this for a trivia question today because as we get through the call today, we'll talk about your planting depths to find moisture and also some sidewall compaction. And both of those things can impact nodal root development. And given that those are so important to feed and fuel our plant throughout the season, we want to make sure that we enable correct nodal root development. So 3/4 of an inch, and that is triggered by red light. That is where red light intercepts in the mesocaudal elongation. So Jim, you want to discuss your ERF updates, or was it Dustin that?
Yeah, you bet. I'll go ahead and, been paying close attention to the emergence risk forecast tool. This time of the year is really the time to focus in on it, and really been getting a lot of questions, especially yesterday, mainly because of those days in the red. So, and I will say, running it this morning, it was basically saying the same thing as what you see on the screen there, which is for the 24th of April, which would be Friday. So getting a lot of high risk categories for emergence, albeit just right barely in the high risk. 18 days triggers the high risk category. And it's, you think, oh, we've got pretty ideal planting conditions now, which we have. We've got really good heat for this time of the year. But of course, if you go to the next slide, you can see what's triggering these high risks and the longer days to emergence. Really those next few days, obviously, once we get to the 25th, which is Saturday, and from then on, we just are not accumulating many GDUs, and especially those days of the 27th and 28th. So that's really the higher risk, or the reason for the higher risk. Plus, boy, after today, it doesn't look like any 80-degree days for a while. And after tomorrow, it doesn't look like any 70-degree days for a while. We know the forecast can change this time of the year and probably will, but based right now on that 10-day to 2-week forecast, there isn't any highs really, at least up in Spencer along Highway 18 above low 60s. So it's just going to slow down that overall time to emergence. Go ahead, if you would, please, Nora. And this is really a big part of it as well. So that imbibitional chilling, which is a factor, is showing up for a couple of days, both Saturday and Monday for this location, Hull, right along Highway 18. And of course, that alert is triggered by the chance of 1/10 of an inch of rain or more within the 2 days of that particular day, plus less than 3 GDU accumulation for that particular day. So you can see for the 25th and for the 27th, it meets those criteria, and that triggers the alert. So, we're just not going to get much movement to get that seed going, and that's why it's saying 18 days till emergence. go ahead with the next slide if you would. And this just shows also Fort Dodge. So Fort Dodge, you don't have any alerts. You do have the cautions. So you just got a little higher GDU accumulation, but you still have the potential for a precip coming in those days. And I believe it was saying 17 days to emergence. So, you're talking 1 day difference, but that puts it into the less risk category. And really for the same thing for planting today, it's all these locations are right in there, like 17 or 18 days to emergence.
And this is something, guys, where we're not necessarily like standing in front of planters, right? We're not, oh my goodness, we're super worried about imbibitional chilling, but this is a value-added touch point that you can bring to your growers when you're selecting what product to put out into the ground. Maybe that has you choose which one you're going for, things like that. Just to talk with your growers and make sure they understand and have the correct expectations for what they're putting into the ground. Does that all make sense?
Yeah. And to sum up, I've been getting the question a heck of a lot yesterday, the day before. Yeah, I'm not saying don't plant here. Obviously, these next few days looks ideal. If we are still dry by chance on Friday, that's when we need to reassess, because that looks like a little higher risk, because we're not taking advantage of the heat of this week. So take a look at how things are. If you can run the ERF yourself, or if you can't, contact your DEKALB rep and just really talk about that risk coming up. But boy, right now, full bore, I would not hold back on planting, even though it might say high risk or 18 days to emergence from today's planting date.
Right. Just let your growers know we're not stopping them. It's just setting correct expectations. So one thing as we get rolling for planting, I thought that this was interesting is that, so you guys know that with 3 TAs, we cover quite a bit of area, right? And there is a very dramatic difference across this territory of like the haves and have-nots and what issues we're dealing with where. And so this was in the newsletter this week. This is the rainfall so far for the month of April. We can see that there are, in Wisconsin, I'm happy we're not these guys. There are places that have gotten 10 inches of rain in the month of April. Radar indicated. I'm really happy that we're not those guys, but even when we're dealing with, 6 to 8 inches of rain potentially in some of these eastern locations, that's a lot. That soil takes a while to drain, to dry out. And so in this part of the world, we are dealing with the question of how deep do I plant to get moisture? At what point is it too much? What's our goals there? While over here, we're talking don't mud your corn in, right? Don't rush it. Don't do anything crazy. And it's just really interesting to me to see that on the line, that it is a very dramatic line. And hopefully we don't see this continue, right, throughout the season. Hopefully this mellows out a little bit. But when we're looking at this, I actually took this picture yesterday at a plot here in Sac County that we were towing that line of the moisture. We could not go any deeper. We didn't want to go any deeper. And here's where we were setting our seed. Our other ones right here. I couldn't really get them in a picture. And you can see that moisture at 9 in the morning was right there. So the thought process, why we want to bring this up, is when you're checking planters with a guy, if you're out digging seed, not only are you checking the depth of the seed, check where that moisture is. We all kind of agree 3 inches. You can go 3 inches in work ground to find moisture for corn. It's pretty forgiving. All that air will kind of collapse once we finally get a rain. I'd rather you go deep than shallow. I'd rather you go 4 inches than 1 inch in a lot of ways. But when we're discussing with our grower expectations for emergence, if we're hitting that moisture line consistently, that even without rain, that field is going to be much more consistent at emergence time. If we're not consistent with our planting depth, and we're hitting above the moisture line, below the moisture line, above the moisture line, below the moisture line, we're setting ourselves up for inconsistent emergence right away without nature coming in to play at all, just where we're placing the seed. So that's a conversation to have. I know it's hard to stop planters to even check. That seems like just the most offensive thing that we can ask people sometimes, and I get it. But this is one of those things that we're wanting to check for, especially when you get into Northwest Iowa, where we're dancing that line in some places. So if you want, if a guy isn't comfortable going deeper, maybe a notch up and keep everything the same above that moisture line, right? My personal opinion is I really don't want to see you go back and forth across that moisture line if we can avoid it. What's your guys' opinions on that?
I would agree everything you said, Nora. I mean, biggest thing is just get out of the tractor seat, go back, look how it's going. Always err on the side of being too deep than too shallow. We just always have ran into trouble over the last several years on shallow planted corn, but just get out of the seat and look. It's not a race. That's the biggest thing. That's the most important pass of the year. Just take your time. We still have some time, I know, but it has felt like the Indy 500 out here this week a little bit.
For my Eastern guys, I call it the Boontona 500. They like to go, and they like to go fast.
Yeah, a lot of good points. And 3 inches sounds deep, but most cases, if we're that dry, we know we've got fluff on the ground, and we can easily take out a ½ inch, when it settles down or when we get moisture on top of that. So even though it may be measuring 3, more realistically, it's 2.5, and 2.5's not a bad place to be. Yeah, ideally, I like 2.25 to 2.5, but again, this is a little more extreme that we've got to get in deeper to get to that consistent moisture.
And remember that your soil in the worked ground of Northwest Iowa, your soil will shrink once the rains come. So that's a point too. We want it 2 and 2.5. If you're at 2 in extremely fluffy worked soil, you're gonna shorten that up pretty quickly as soon as we get a rain. So the other thing that we want to call out that we're really talking to our guys about, as it's not a race, we know, neighbors are going, we know it's really nice out, mudding corn in. We cannot stress this enough. This is so limiting right off the bat. Making sure that we do not, this is not, I could not find the most dramatic pictures. I looked for days for pictures I know that I had. This essentially can turn into concrete, right? And I know that some of you guys, especially to my very southeast, have some very fine soils, some extra clays. If it were to dry out, knock on wood, if it were to dry out, that can open the furrow. If we continue with the winds that we've seemed to have constantly anymore, that can lead to something called rootless corn syndrome, where the furrow actually opens. The roots cannot grow through the air. They will callus off. We will limit those nodal roots almost immediately. So you can have the mohawking, you can have rootless corn system. Moral of the story is we are limiting ourselves from that original first pass. There's no rescuing that we can do, or minimal rescuing that we can do for severe sidewall compaction. And I did include it in the newsletter this week for you Eastern guys, some dramatic pictures of mohawks. When you're able to pull corn out of the ground, that's a trident or a mohawk. You shouldn't be able to pull corn out of the ground to begin with. But if you can pull corn out of the ground and it has that mohawk or the trident, that is a poor start to the season. Probably we just ran a little too fast to begin with. And this is something that we'll want to check, just like depth, just like our other planter settings, we're going to want to check more than once. The variation across the field is important. Check that down pressure, make your adjustments. That is just one of the most limiting things that we can do to the season in my world. So let's make sure we're taking our time and coaching our growers correctly on that.
Yeah, we have a lot of good soil conditions across the area, but then there's some areas, down to the southeast that's not ideal, and it's way too early to make some poor decisions already. So let's make sure we're planning in good conditions. The next thing we wanted to hit on, which might seem a little early, but as you look at the GDU accumulation that we have already, accumulated since the insurance plant date of 4/11, we are getting there. 120 GDUs in a lot of areas. Rule of thumb, 120 GDUs to get the corn out of the ground. This graph on the lower left here, Purdue puts out a pretty good website that you can go in and track GDUs, and look at timing of silking and black layer based on relative maturity of hybrids. It is a good tool. So that's just a kind of a screenshot. But we did want to bring up we are getting into the time where we're going to have to assess some stands. We should see some corn maybe popping out of the ground of this early planted stuff with the GDUs we've had. I know everybody's busy and it's tough, and growers is tough, but the problems we've ran into the last couple of years, if we just we're early yet. And, the sprayer is not designed, we go out with the sprayer to control weeds. We do not go out with the sprayer to scout stands. And we've ran into many issues over the years of stand problems in the sprayer, where if we could have captured that a lot sooner, we still can capture 100% yield potential, where we catch these way late into May and decide we have a problem, and then we're really up in the air. Do we leave it? Should we have tore it up about 3 weeks ago and we could have still had 100% yield potential? So we are right at the cusp of seeing some of this early planted corn come out of the ground. So we wanted to hit on a few of these topics. So scouting phase more.
Yeah. So we're gonna cover the stand evaluation, and guys, just like Dustin said, scouting pays, right? I wish I had as much enthusiasm. I do count a lot of corn, so I shouldn't say that. I wish we all had the enthusiasm as a kindergartner of counting corn. Like, they just want to count to 30, right? That's an easy number. To 34, we can do it. If you need some motivation, grab your little one, grab a neighbor. They love to count. I do that a lot with my kids in the spring. But we want to make sure we're not just counting at the field drive. I know we're not going to walk. We all have a lot of time, right? We're not going to walk a full 160, but the field drive's not the place to take a single stand count, right? Go check multiple areas of the field. Take and the picture here is a tape measure. I actually have a rope that is measured out with 2 carabiners on each side, so I don't have to set the tape measure each time. I can just throw it out. You can get that at your local hardware store for $4. We're looking for those gaps and uneven emergence. Doing that early, just like Dustin said, we're able to catch it and make management decisions early. We want to just start our problem solving. Dig our seeds. Do we have a pest? Did we have imbibitional chilling? Did we have maybe some planter setting issue where we had poor seed to soil contact? Maybe we had an air pocket or something like that. We ended up maybe the moisture line. We were varied in the response. What's that problem solving? And then always dig, don't just walk, right? Problem solving. That is one of the biggest values that we can bring to our growers and our customers, is helping understand what happened, why it happened, how can we either not do it again, or, what now? What's the next step in this process? And just like Dustin said, timing matters. We need to be timely on this. We can't, one, because we want to be able to make a management decision, and 2, sometimes our evidence disappears. We can't figure out what happened as stuff starts to break down, rot away, a pest moves on, things like that. I'm also a fan of looking for patterns. Mother Nature doesn't make straight lines. If there's a straight line across the field, a human probably made it, which then goes into my next point of use your digital tools, guys. Look at layers that growers are making, especially, I got to say it, in deer, it actually takes more work to not document what a grower is doing than it does to make the document and have it show up in Op Center. It takes conscious effort to not document the work. So use the digital tools at your disposal, document what you're seeing. I'm going to make a quick plug for climate. You guys know my past in climate. Put a scouting note, even if it is not in the grower's account. It is in your own account. Make the field boundary, drop that pin with some notes, with a classification. It saves the date. It saves the picture. You don't have to go searching your phone for it. You do have to remember what field it's in. But if you're looking maybe for a newsletter picture, you have to remember what field you took the picture in. But this is a tool that you can have even if the grower is not on field view. This is still something that you can do to help, and you can then send it out to the grower with that GPS location. Okay. And it stays all season. Obviously, you can say seasonal or permanent. I have one more. I thought I had one more plug for climate. So Jim, do you want to handle the evaluation slides then?
Yeah, and Dustin hit on the key point. We are able to make some stand counts with the GDUs that we've had toward the earlier side. And so, you look at April 20th through May 5th, and let's say we do end up with 95,000 stand or 25,000 stand, 95% yield potential. Well, if we're able to catch that early enough and plan in that May 5th through the 15th window, we could go get a full stand and be money ahead. Plus, it's probably going to be a lot more even. And believe me, you've got to weigh all factors: the hybrid ear flex, yield potential, and the emotional side. By keeping a 25,000 stand when a grower's not happy, and most likely if it's 25,000, it's up and down. A lot of times that the best thing to do is, even if it's on the borderline for the economics, is to go ahead and start and end up with a full stand, most likely if you're planting, say, the 10th or the 15th of May. So unlike a lot of years, I think with the early heat we've had, this is going to give us a chance to hopefully evaluate some of these stands, at least from the earlier planting dates. And then just some parameters as far as when you're evaluating soybean stands. This is more for resource as far as looking at plants per foot in row spacings, and of course, in solid seed or 15-inch. Heck, even for 30-inch, I like using the hula hoop. And I like carrying one that has a 28-inch diameter, so I don't have to do much math.
Work smarter, not harder. I like it, guys.
That's right.
And then on to the last one, as far as the soybean cutoffs, some of our planting dates. And soybeans, we obviously have a lot more flexibility on yield potential. We know we can still have excellent yields planting in mid-May, if not even the third week of May. In northern and central Iowa. And we know with soybeans, it's part of the reason that usually we can get by with early planting of soybeans and we don't have to have that picket fence stand is they can compensate amazingly well. They can fill in, and even if they're not emerging altogether, we're still going to have really good yield potential. As far as that cutoff, I like 80 to 90,000 on the low side. But you've got a lot of parameters that go into that. If you're in the Des Moines lobe and you've got high pH, or you've got some variable ground, lighter ground, I'm not real comfortable with 80,000 in those scenarios. If I'm on manured ground in Sioux County and I've got white mold potential, 75 to 80,000. If I know it's a variety that can branch out and compensate and fill the canopy, usually I'm going to keep that. So that's where you as dealers come in, making those calls in your own local geography, knowing that grower, knowing the variety, knowing their situation. Hopefully we won't have too many of these, but I think on some of the very ultra early planted beans, as I've looked at a few fields, they're not up yet, but they're very close. So far, they look pretty good. Key thing is, if we happen to get some of these pounding rains, if we get a heavy downpour tomorrow, for example, that crust right as it's emerging might make the difference in whether it's a keeper of a stand or not. So do need to pay attention after we potentially get some of those hard rains to evaluate these stands.
One plug I want to make real quick, because apparently I didn't save my correct version of the PowerPoint. When we're looking at stand establishment, stand evaluation, we're getting these pounding rains. If you have shared accounts in Field View, you can look in the reports tab and you can sort by planting date. You could all the operations that you had shared to you, you can aggregate. And if there are specific planting dates you're looking for, your very early guys that you think might be emerging, you can sort by that. So you're not having to look through every account. You can do the same thing in Ops Center. It's through Work Analyzer, not on the app, online. I'm not very good on the app. But
I think it's on the next slide, Nora. If you go
did
ahead.
I not save where I moved? There we go. Thank you, Jim. I knew I put it in there. Just wanted to call out these planting reports because this can save a lot of time in finding. Hopefully we do not have any problems with crusting tomorrow, right? We don't get those pounding rains. We don't have any frost, or, hopefully we're not, trying to find problems. But this is a really easy way to get those in and sorted without having to run through a bunch of additional documents and searching and spreadsheets and paper notes and the whole shebang. So if you need help trying to figure this out, give me a call. Like I said, this is available in Operations Center as well through Work Analyzer. You can sort by planting date to get those fields right away. So then we will finish with some herbicide notes. Jim, take it away, and then we'll be right on time.
Yeah. Well, most retailers I've talked to said it's been a really good spring, especially from the fertilizer standpoint. We had a decent fall last fall for getting anhydrous, getting some of the dry knocked out. March was decent to get some lime done and some early fertilizer, and most of early April has been pretty conducive to getting work done and spreading things out. But then comes the herbicide world, and that's not always as easy or as friendly, especially when the wind blows, which, surprise, surprise, that's every day lately in Northwest Iowa. Plus, as we're using a lot of these pre-emerge herbicides, we're dealing with what Nora was talking about. You've got the extreme dry in the Northwest, and then you've got the extreme wet in central Iowa. So just wanted to talk a little bit about and show the chart on, the water solubility and the mobility in the soil of different herbicide classes. Some pretty obvious. If we've got our growth regulators, DEKALB products, there's a reason that they are able to have good residual without much moisture. You really don't even need quite that 1/4 inch to get activity out of those DEKALB products. But even some of the others, like metribuzin, Sharpen, some of those products that are good for burn down, without having much moisture. I will say in areas that we've been talking about that are bone dry, powder dry on the top soil, especially, or top surface, especially after some of these winds, sometimes a 1/10 doesn't really even do anything. So in the extreme dry conditions, I would say you almost have to add another 1/4 inch to some of these figures to really feel like you're getting the ground or the soil saturated on top, and especially those top 2 inches. But then as you go down the line, some of your group 15s, metallochlors and your acetochlors, typically you're going to take a little bit more moisture. We know that, especially with Warrant, where we've got the encapsulation. And then on down the line with your trizenes and some of your group 15s too. So really just something need to be aware of. Challenge to get these herbicides on, but also challenge getting them activated. And we know we've had some early applications of herbicide, and some of them, have had quite a bit of moisture on in central Iowa. So as usual, back to the scouting and, okay, when are these starting to break? We always want to be timely anyway with our post-emerge, but some of these products, between lack of activation or maybe too much moisture, it's going to be compromised. So we need to be on top of that. So just wanted to use this time as a reminder for that.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, Nora, Dustin?
I have some fields that are coming up on almost a month of being applied with pre's. So make sure we're out there looking at those guys as we come to that 4 to 6 week mark.
These 80-degree days are starting to bring weeds in a big way.
Yeah. Yes. Well, guys, we know you're all super busy. Thank you for joining us. Here's your QR code for CCA credits. Call if you need anything. Stay safe out there. You guys are working hard. You'll earn a rain day when it comes for sure. But please reach out if you need anything.
You bet. Thanks for being on, everyone, and have a good planting day.